Well, it's absolutely fantastic to be back with you all. And we do have a surprise guest with you. We've got Chuck Harris coming all the way from the States. I'm not actually sure what state he's in right now, but he's got some really up-to-date news to share with us. But Chuck, it's great to connect with you. And I know we know a few of the same people because you were engineering for Integrity Music for a number of years. Would you like to just fill us in on what you were doing there with the contemporary Christian music scene and the worship in particular?
Yeah, I would love that. I came to Integrity Music from California. They were based in Mobile, Alabama. And it was funny, actually, Don Moen came through the studio where I was working in California, and he struck up a good friendship with the other engineer that was working in the studio there, Ron Davis. And so he kind of recruited Ron. They wanted to build a recording studio so Don and other producers wouldn't have to travel so much to get projects done. And he invited Ron to come out and help them design and build the recording studios for Integrity. And Ron ended up, recruiting me to come out there a couple of years later after he did. And so we worked in the studios. And back in '94, when I started, it was a busy, busy place. There were so many projects going on, and we were furiously trying to just keep up with everything. We were working 80, 90 hours a week, just mixing projects and hosting other producers and engineers in the studios. And so we got to work on a lot of great projects back then with a lot of great artists, all the Ron Kenoly, Don Moen.
I was thinking of Ron Kenoly,
Yeah, Alvin Slaughter, so many people, Paul Wilbur, Paul Baloche, just all of the Integrity artists. And I was there for 11 years, and I just have to say it was a wonderful 11 years for me personally. Just the people, if you ever want to doubt, okay, the Christian music business and all of that, there's humans, there's mistakes, there's foibles, but overall the quality of the people that I had the opportunity to work with, it was fantastic. And I don't have any qualms about the integrity, pun intended, I guess, of the folks that I was working with. And it was a great time. So
that's fantastic. Sure. So was Tom hanging out there a lot? I know, because he was doing projects around the world at that time, I believe, wasn't he?
Tom Brooks,
yeah.
Yes, he was. He was still producing a number of projects there. And we sort of grew so fast that he couldn't possibly do all of the projects that we needed. So I was kind of there when we were reaching out to work with other producers at the time, Paul Mills, Stephen V. Taylor. There's a number of people that were producing other projects for us. And it was a fun and exciting time. And Tom was in and out of the office, and we got to, be at several projects that he was recording live and all of that. And what we were doing is, working in the studios there. We also would go to the live venues where we were recording these projects and, set up all the mics and record and capture everything. And those were fun events, worshipful. There was a sense of God just doing special things during that time, and we all felt it, and we all were just so humbled to be a part of it. And so being there at these live events that are all all the Integrity Hosanna recordings that exist now and all of that. So I'm so.
And this was all analog back in those days, I suppose, wasn't it?
It was a lot. We kind of evolved from the analog. We did, we had trucks there with two 24-track machines locked together, and then and that was that for a long while. And then we did the ADAT thing came in, and so we were doing the not to bore everybody with technical, but ADAT was the first kind of foray into digital that we could do, and we lived through all the frustrations of that, and finally transitioned into Pro Tools and the digital audio workstations.
I've got to ask you, I'm very curious, you said you started out in California. Whereabouts in California were you?
I was in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, you were? So Did you ever go up to record plant? Just
Oh yeah, I was there a few times, and
Wally Hyder.
Right. I never met Wally, but yeah, for sure. All of those studios around there. My first job was working in a studio with a guy named David Denny, and he was the guitar player, one of the guitar players in the Steve Miller Band. And David gave me an internship, and I was there for about 6 months and got to work on some pretty cool projects with some great, musicians that I admired. And I was flabbergasted that I had that opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I went to work for a company called Master Productions, and that was a big, 24-track analog studio with a big room where we could do string sessions and choir sessions and such. And we were doing a lot of work for publishers like Lillinus, which is a choral publishing company, producers Tom Fetke and people like that. And that's the studio where Don Moen came through, and he was producing a Russian album, and they scoured the country, and the only Russian choir they could find was in San Francisco. So he came out from Alabama to San Francisco to record this Russian choir, and that's where Ron and I met him for the first time.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I was probably roughly the same period, perhaps a few years earlier, but I was out in Northern California on a Christian commune. And so we used to have literally the back of a church, we set up a little studio space, and eventually we converted somebody's garage. So we'd do trips to San Francisco and like check out what was happening with some of these studios, but we never had the money to create that. We never bought a studio machine or anything. We were just
Understood.
So, but we, it's amazing because we still got these master reels, and out in California, I know exactly where they are, and they've been preserved. Some of them have been digitized, and there's some precious music. Live festivals in Santa Cruz we used to record, 73, 74, 75. And some of that, I've got some of that stuff and hoping to remix it pretty soon.
Wow.
But I could divert a little bit because I'm really curious as to know how, whether you've always been a Christian or how you came to faith in Christ.
Right. I grew up in a fairly average, typical American home, no real faith. We went to, my mom kind of insisted that we go to church on Christmas and Easter, and that was about it. And for me, when I was about 11 years old, our family had been having some internal struggles. My mom and dad's relationship was struggling and stuff. So they separated when I was 11. And I chose to stay with my mom and my two sisters. And we kind of floundered for a while. It was back when drugs were getting really popular. And so my sisters and I all got involved with that a little bit. And at the time, I was in the 7th grade, I think. And a friend of mine, his name is David, he moved to the area and he was going to my school. And we ended up in a couple of like homeroom classes together and stuff. And he had such a very strong faith. And his parents were missionaries and they'd just come back from overseas. And so he was the guy that was always talking about the Lord in school. Kids would come up and ask him lots of questions. Teachers would come and ask him questions. There was just an anointing on him to defend the gospel and to preach the gospel and to share with people. And he started a little Bible study for the other students, and there was meeting, and I kind of avoided all of that. But after a while, there was something about him that just attracted me to his spirit and whatever it was about him that now I know was Christ, in him, making him different. And I was really getting messed up in drugs and just sort of starting on addictions and things like that. My 7th, 8th grade year. And I finally decided to go to one of those Bible studies that they had. And a friend of mine invited me to go. And I was really touched. And I was floundering because I was this kid from a broken family with all these drugs and things going on in my life, and I had no sense of purpose, and I was just lost and very lonely. As a 12, 13-year-old, you're not necessarily aware of all of that, but it's going on. And God just reached down and touched me in a very special way that night. And I tell people that I kind of got tricked into becoming a Christian because another friend of mine who was at the Bible study, after it was all over, they had great prayers. The kids, one of the girls prayed for me in the big group, and I was just like so touched. Prayed that the God would just love me so much, and I was just so touched. Yeah. And afterwards, I was talking to my friend David, and we're just kind of chatting. And Toby, my other friend, he walks up and he goes, "Hey, David, what do you think about what Chuck did tonight?" And I'm wondering, where are you going with this? I have no idea. And David says, "Oh, what?" And Toby says, "Well, he's decided to give his life to Christ." And I hadn't said anything to anybody. And I think it's just kind of the way Toby was. Maybe he heard something from the Lord or whatever. But David just real sincerely, he just turned and looked me in the eye and said, "Is that true?" And in that moment, I knew I had a decision, an opportunity for a decision. And I just looked him in the eye and I said, "Yeah." And so we went to a back room and had a prayer together and talked. And that group of people just sort of discipled me for a while. It was a beautiful thing. Wonderful. And it was a radical change in my life.
So it was really a nurturing, a small group of people your own age and background, in a sense, that nurtured you. I think that's really something that's so important in the church today, something that would tend to be missing. Perhaps ironically, with COVID-19, we're getting it back a little bit because we're all going on Zoom, and we do a weekly Zoom prayer meeting, and you're literally face to face with everybody. There's no escape. But I think the small group thing is really, really what touches people and lifts them out of just religion and into a dynamic of faith. And that faith, I mean, for those of you watching today, it's like Chuck and I are talking about a faith that actually changes and informs our life. It's not just a thing. It's not going to, it's becoming. It's not going to church, it's becoming something. And Chuck, I've got so much admiration for the work you've done, and the creativity of those Integrity albums, and you're producing them every month. It's just, it's informed my life back then, still does. And I know that kind of level of creativity is birthed in each one of us because we're in contact with the great creator. And it could be just kindness, acts of kindness to your neighbor you never thought about before. And that's something that can change people's lives. It's wonderful. Can I ask you a question about the contemporary Christian music scene? Because a lot of the Integrity recordings are very orchestrated in a sense. And I think that reflects Tom Brooks's background as well. But now we're seeing a lot of click tracks going on and so forth, But I think we're entering into a new dimension yet again. That's what I sense anyway. Is there something you could tell us about what you see, where especially Christian worship, contemporary Christian worship, like Tim Hughes and that type of thing, is going now?
Right. Yeah, I think it's hard to get a read on because it feels like everything is sort of upended a little bit these days, and we've had the proliferation of live streaming music and downloads and all of that stuff, and it's changed the industry so much that I feel like a lot of what's happening right now is that there are so many wonderful young artists who are making music, and they have the ability now to produce music at home because of all of the Pro Tools and all of that stuff. And so it's kind of like music is more getting out when people are releasing their own music. It feels like the labels and such, they're still happening and there's still good stuff going on there. But I just feel like I'm encouraged because I kind of look around at society and I see things being so dark in so many areas. We're in political upheaval, we're social things that are happening, and it's so confusing. And I just have the opportunity to connect with some young artists here in the area where I live. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee, by the way. Just down the road.
You're in Tennessee, yeah.
Yeah. We're just down the road from Nashville. But
well, yeah, I thought that was Nashville. When you said you were traveling back, I thought Nashville.
Yeah, and so it's it's fun because I get to rub shoulders with a lot of young artists now. And, it's probably something in my own heart, but I tend to kind of assume that a lot of young people are a little bit lost, or a little bit, somewhere in their relationship with the Lord have maybe become ungrounded from the Word and from the things that are so important to undermine our underline or undergird our faith. That so I kind of assume that, and then I'm so pleasantly surprised when I get in the context of worship with these folks, and are hearing their heart cry out, and their knowledge of the scriptures, and their just their love for the Lord that's honest and pure and gritty. And so I think there's a lot to be said for artists releasing their music in a smaller circle, in their niches of people, and being more involved with the local churches and their local fellowships, and writing songs to worship the Lord, and not writing them from the perspective, oh, I'm going to try to get a record deal and become famous. Because I think that's kind of what happened to the Christian music for a while, is that we tended to, all of a sudden it became a little bit more about airplay and big releases and record sales and all of that stuff. And live streaming came in and took that all away from the record labels. And now artists are more honest and are expressing themselves much more as artists and honestly.
Yeah, it's been my privilege to be in a few home sessions over the before lockdowns a couple of years ago in 2019, and it's absolutely great to have a room full of 30 people and have worship going on in that living room type of context. And I think back in the Jesus movement days, somebody would write a song, and then you'd hear it the following week down the road 50 miles, and it would have morphed into something else. And you'd have these arguments about, we've got the original song. No, this is how you play it. Because back then, you might have a rough cassette tape of something, but Karen Lafferty came through, I think, in 1971, and what she had written changed by the time she reached LA. We were up in Northern California, 800 miles, and it's morphed into slightly different. And it was really great because people weren't worried about, who owns the copyright and so forth. And I realized people have got to make a living, but there wasn't this whole paranoia about it. There tends to be today. You sort of answered the question I was going to ask you was what advice you'd give to someone starting out in perhaps the local church worship band here in England. If you've got 50, there's lots of churches with 50 people in attendance, and you've got a little worship band, and what advice you'd give a worship team who are just being faithful doing what they're doing each week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that is so true, that if you can, as a young worship leader, young artist, that is the best place for you in terms of writing songs and presenting songs and singing songs together and worshiping together, is in your local church, in your living room with your friends, and that, because that flushes out things that could be pretense, and it helps you hone your skills. And I think that God is always in the business of directing our paths, and when we find ourselves faithful with where we are, then that's how we find doors opening later on, because we are faithful and we're not trying to skip the steps. I'm not trying to become a doctor without going through years of school and college and medical school and all that it takes to become a doctor. I'm not trying to short circuit myself because, I'm a talent, I can play the guitar and I can sing. That's great, but it doesn't make you a worship leader, And so that's what I always tell people. For me, even though I've done the whole industry thing and made big records and worked with all the great people, all the names that people recognize, I learned how to worship in my living room with my friends at a Bible study. And that was my heart of worship, started in that place. And I've carried that through my whole life.
That's fantastic. We've been talking to Chuck Harris, and if you hold on, guys, because in the next session, we're going to be giving you some updates that Chuck can give us right up to date here, January 2021. So don't go away, anybody. Stay on the channel. Thanks so much, Chuck, for sharing with us. And we'll be back in another session. Thank you.